Our podcast lead presenter David Bockwell has 30 years of certification assessment experience and has undertaken over 7,000 days of certification assessment. He worked full-time for BSI as operations manager for 10 years before setting up his own business carrying out independent certification assessment over the last 20 years with 19 accredited certification bodies. ISO Builder is a registered trademark of Bockwell Limited. All online content is protected by international copyright and the Trademarks Act 1994. ISO Builder Online is not responsible, liable, nor necessarily support views as expressed by our podcast presenters in any way. They are their own interpretation and views. We accept no liability for any content. Patrons should always source confirmatory opinions regarding interpretations of management systems in relation to their own situation and intended use. No content is intended to be offensive in any way.
Six tips to make your ISO Stage 2 audit go more smoothly. Number 1, be well prepared. Number 2, take internal audit seriously. 3, implement corrective actions. 4, don't forget your management review. 5, correctly monitor objectives. And 6, ensure that everything's in place, shipshape and clean. Now, Stage 2 audit, or sometimes more commonly known as a main audit, a certification audit, would follow typically in the certification process an initial or a Stage 1 audit. Many years ago, prior to the mid-90s, there was in fact just one certification audit. It was not split into 2 stages. The purpose of the Stage 1 is about readiness and typically would be of a shorter duration than the Stage 2 audit. And the Stage 2 audit is there to ensure that your documentation meets all the requirements of the standard, which would be clearly set out, but then to ensure that the documentation is actually being used. So the Stage 1 will challenge the readiness, will challenge the documentation, but the Stage 2 will then ensure that the processes that have been identified are actually being correctly followed. Now, at Stage 1, usually, or initial, points of action or areas of concern, depending on the certification body, would be raised and not findings. So at Stage 2, the certification body are able to raise maybe opportunities for improvement and or observations, but more importantly, non-conformities, be they minor or major non-conformities. Other sessions that are available on ISO Builder Radio are inclusive of definitions of major and minor non-conformities, what to do with them. So please listen for the next broadcast of those subjects. So, 6 tips to help make your ISO Stage 2 audit go more smoothly. They're not designed to impress the auditor. The purpose is to really demonstrate that your system is under control, is in place, is as mature as possible. And often at Stage 2, certification auditors find that the management systems are in fact quite immature. It's not always the case, but often they are immature for a number of reasons. But number 1, be well prepared. The ISO certification should be a living management process that's constantly updated and optimized. It's a dynamic system and therefore should be real and up to date. For that to be true, you have to establish a schedule of tasks, internal audits and management reviews and stick to them. Make sure that they've actually been carried out prior to the certification Stage 2 audit, and also in plenty of time. The worst thing that you can do is wait for a month before the audit and then try to rush through to complete everything. So be well prepared. That makes the certification body auditor feel confident and more comfortable that everything is being well planned in advance. Number 2, take internal audits seriously. Holding a rigorous internal audit will allow you to catch any serious findings maybe your system defines them as non-conformity before the stage 2 audit. The internal audit can also prepare staff for the forthcoming certification audit process to get them familiar with maybe some questions that might be asked, or at least the process of being questioned. So take internal audits seriously. The other challenge that certification bodies have is, of course, that if something is identified at the certification stage, there is a point in principle that the certification body should not be finding those things, and that the internal audit process should actually be finding things before the certification process. So that can also reflect upon the robustness of internal audit, not only the competency of internal auditors, but whether the approach to this internal audit is actually being taken seriously. This is the discussion around using checklists and competence of internal auditors, how long they've been doing it. Are they able to challenge in the same way that external certification process would challenge a management system? So take internal audits seriously. Number 3, implement corrective actions. You should take corrective actions to limit recurrent problems as soon as they're identified. So if findings are slow to be dealt with and they're found by the certification process, that really doesn't look good. So as a part of internal audit, tip 2, ensure that any actions that have been identified are actually taken seriously and dealt with properly. The root cause has been identified, analysed, and prevention, although not in terms of preventive action, is not really something that management systems talk about anymore, because that's switched to risk-based thinking. But certainly evidence of why the problem actually occurred in the first place, and ensuring that it doesn't reoccur, is still a live and valid challenge for internal audit. In fact, any findings that are raised, be they internal or external. Of course, major problems that are found by internal auditors could delay the certification, so ensure that those actions are carried out quickly after the internal audit process. And of course, let's not forget that internal audits are not necessarily the only route to the identification of finding or fault. It shouldn't just be for a scheduled internal audit to find something wrong with the management system, with the process, compliance with the process. There should be something within the system that helps the identification of shortfall or weakness or process improvement, not just necessarily through the internal audit process. Number 4, don't forget, management review is a big element of a management system, designed, as we've discussed in previous sessions, designed to demonstrate suitability, adequacy and effectiveness of the management system, and not forgetting alignment in the strategic direction of the organisation and its policy and its commitments. So management review, well structured, isn't something necessarily that should just be squeezed in to fit a stage 2 certification assessment, but should be a strategic part of the management system, and underpins the principle of continual improvement. So that needs to be carried out after you're satisfied that internal audits are effective and that the system is actually in place. So the management review looks over a number of management system outputs to ensure suitability, adequacy and effectiveness, and top management should be involved there, so they need to be aware and familiar with the process of management review, and it would be good for top management to be available at the stage 2 audit to be able to discuss the management review and other things as well, such as objectives and policy and commitment and leadership. But nevertheless, through management review, they could also discuss that the management review, albeit it may be that the system is a little immature, is starting to build on the principles of continual improvement and demonstrate suitability, adequacy and effectiveness. So it's good that top management and the management responsible people are familiar with the process of management review and can discuss this with confidence at a Stage 2 certification audit. Correctly monitoring objectives is an integral part of that and management review, and is tip number 5. So to ensure that objectives have been set, and again at Stage 2 audit it's often very difficult because the system is quite immature, but across quality environment and health and safety management systems there should be still sufficient evidence of objectives that have been complied with, fulfilled, that they are clearly measurable, that they have targets that underpin the principle of continual improvement. And so although they may be quite new, the system would be quite new, certification bodies are still looking for evidence that progress is being made, that objectives have been identified, they're clear, and that they are in fact measurable. So tip number 6, finally, what we have here is make sure everything's in place and do cursory reviews. We're not suggesting that there should be a clean up and empty skips, for example, and have a brush up, but inevitably be best prepared and don't leave yourself in a situation where the certification body actually find things easy to pick up and easy to find. They should be being picked up by yourselves and by the system before the certification body find them. So there we've covered 6 tips that should hopefully, there may not necessarily be all the tips that there could be. I'm sure others can think of others, such as copious amounts of tea and coffee and etc. and all sorts of nice things. But nevertheless, those are the key 6 areas that certification bodies are over and above looking for strong evidence of compliance against the processes and the management system that's actually been adopted are in place and have been thoroughly tested through internal audit. I hope that session's helped, and we've got another one coming along shortly. Thank you.
ISO Builder Online, quality information for quality managers. ISO Builder is a registered trademark of Balkwell Limited. All online content is protected by international copyright and the Trademarks Act 1994. ISO Builder Online is not responsible, liable, nor necessarily support views as expressed by our podcast presenters in any way. They are their own interpretation and views. We accept no liability for any content. Patrons should always source confirmatory opinions regarding interpretations of management systems in relation to their own situation and intended use. No content is intended to be offensive in any way. Balkwell Limited, Management Systems Consultancy Audit and Training. Contact us by email, davidbalkwell@balkwellltd.com or office@balkwellltd.com. Established in 1999.